Gary, I welcome you to Late Night in the Midlands, and I also welcome you to give us some background.
Hi, Michael. Thank you. Is everybody doing okay? You're doing okay? I know the weather's pretty awful out there. Is everyone hanging in okay?
Yeah, we're hanging in there pretty good, but I've had a rough start here tonight. First, my startup music wouldn't go; it turned bright red and said no. Then I had the bio just went, I don't know, turned into a jigsaw puzzle on me. So
Oh,
other than
no.
that, doing fine. Yeah, it's warmed up here a little bit.
Oh, good.
Yeah, thank God. But I don't think it warmed up everywhere. I think I'm one of the lucky ones.
Well, I know that, everybody on the West Coast, we're not getting it so bad, but we're certainly thinking about everybody else, and we know everyone's having a hard time, so our thoughts and prayers are with you guys.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And, we had it pretty rough here, but there's places that had it a lot rougher than we did. We got the cold and the wind. Some of these places got the ice and the snow to go along with it. So it made it a lot rougher. But I find sometimes a lot of snow's not a bad thing because it kind of insulates and makes it warmer, I've heard. I don't know.
Yeah.
So, Gary, give us a little bit of background. What got you interested in this field, and tell us a little bit about your work, and let's learn about these crop circles.
Okay. Well, I think like a lot of people, I looked at the pictures in the 90s of crop circles and went online and looked through the online databases and looked at all of them kind of year after year and saw the pictures and enjoyed them that way. And then in 2000, I was going to school in Santa Barbara doing my master's degree in Jungian psychology, and I was reading a book by a guy named Edward Edinger called The Creation of Consciousness. And that book was about Carl Jung's book called Answer to Job, in which he puts the sort of Western God image on the couch, and he just sort of saw that there's an interactive relationship there between humans and the Hebrew God, and it's kind of a dynamic situation in which the human tends to be leading the moral way and kind of pulling Yahweh into more consciousness. And he thought, well, psychologically, maybe, we certainly see a dynamic relationship here. And that was really interesting and satisfying to me. And the idea that maybe there's something that we're doing on a human level that, and he didn't mean it metaphysically, but we can take it that way. That, maybe there's something we're doing on a human level that's kind of working out the shadow in the background and the big background there. So I found that interesting, and I'm a student of philosophy, and I've thought that there's a good answer for why there's evil in the world there if we're kind of working out sort of God's shadow or something like that. That was an interesting idea. So I found it satisfying personally, and reading that book, something snapped into my head about crop circles, and I thought, wow, there's another step here, another dynamic step where there's something, that we're taking forward. We're going into this new way of thinking about the world and ourselves, and it's kind of like, I think we're at one of those moments, where, Galileo and Copernicus were a long time ago. We're finding out the world isn't flat. We're finding out that we're not the only conscious thing in the universe, and I think that's a really big step. And there's a lot of trials and tribulations involved with that step, but here we are, and that's what got me writing. I wrote a master's thesis out of that idea and turned it into a book, and then the book has been self-published and doing well, and it's coming out in August again on North Atlantic Books, and away we go.
I'll be honest, I haven't read the book, but I do plan on it.
Okay.
Yeah, I absolutely do plan on it now, but I am very interested in the whole topic of the crop circles. I remember hearing about it when I was a kid, and the news would come on. And I remember one night when the 6 o'clock news came on, I was sitting at the table with my parents, and the lady said, "Oh, there's some guys who admitted to doing it with boards on their feet." And I'm thinking, there's no way, right? There's no way they could have done that, is there?
Yeah, we know those guys were a bunch of BS. They couldn't even make one good one. There was numerous trials with those two where they were given a chance to demonstrate their work, and it was always a joke. They could never do anything really well. Now, there are teams in the UK now that go and make really good hoax crop circles. But the story, that's Doug and Dave that you're referring to there, those two. And their story, got published all around the world and publicized by a PR company from England. And that PR company only magically appeared out of nowhere to promote that one story, and then magically disappeared and never was heard from again. And the only address they ever gave was pretty close to, or in a complex where there were offices of British intelligence.
Yes, that tells me something. When they go out of their way to try to make something look like it's all a hoax, and for a fact that it's not, what are they trying to cover up?
Yeah, well, they're trying to cover up the truth, and the truth is out there. The truth is something is definitely going on. It's been going on for a long time, and there's science and history that can tell us objectively that there's a genuine crop circle mystery. There's also a hoaxing phenomenon going on, but there's a genuine crop circle mystery that's been going on for a long time. Now,
would you say that, out of all your research, would you think that there's, I don't know, this is coming from, say, an ET source? Or, I've seen videos where people actually tried to claim that it was like a natural phenomenon of the Earth, but I don't think Mother Nature or Mother Earth is, all that good at drawing. These things look incredible.
Yeah, it's definitely something non-human, in my opinion. We know it's not people making it. So it is intelligent, it has intention, and, there's a whole bunch, in that question you just posed, Michael, there's a whole bunch of different things that I could talk about. So one of them I could talk about is, what do we mean when we say ET or extraterrestrial? I'm liking the word ultra-terrestrial lately. What do we mean? I'd ask the listeners to really think about, okay, we say crop circles are done by ETs, and I certainly think they're done by some sort of other being, whatever you want to call it, some sort of other intelligence in the universe. I would ask your listeners, what do you picture there? Is it dimensional? Are they, do they have, just think about your own answer, because I think that for me, where we end up at the end of the day with this is that we're invited to think about our own questions more. And so that's where we go. Another way I could think about this question, what's making it? Well, a lot of us do think that there's something to do with the Earth, because, a lot of the key researchers, if you ask them, they're going to say, it sure feels like they're telling us something to do with the Earth.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. That, I look at it personally. I think it's a message that we're being told something. I don't know what, because no one's being honest with us. But I've seen some that looks like they've got, some of the designs are like planets, solar systems, and things like that. So I don't know. What do you think?
Yeah, well, there's definitely people that have done really interesting research where they'll look at each individual one and kind of interpret it and find meaning in it. And I think that's, good. I think that's all fine and well, and there's a place for that. But I also think when we do that maybe there's also another piece, another way of approaching the mystery that we're not doing. And I think that, they're works of art. You can go into a museum and try and decode the Mona Lisa, but I think there's also something about, the aesthetic experience, the visual, beautiful experience. I mean, they're beautiful. I think we're supposed to have a feeling, emotional response and a wonder and get involved with them in a whole-bodied way, as well as trying to solve the puzzle, and that's all fine and good. But I think there's another piece there, too, and it calls us into, a more feeling-based appreciation of wonder and mystery. Our culture today is very high on itself, and I think we often think that we can, solve every puzzle and all this, and I think we've lost the mystery, and this phenomenon brings us back into wondering about mystery and participating with the mystery.
Right. And, one of the problems, I guess, with science, scientists today, is that if they can't measure it, then, it don't exist. And,
right.
They try to explain everything off, and they refuse to think outside the box. And, these crop circles are definitely something to be amazed by. And I have a picture slider on the homepage of LateNightInTheMidlands.com, and I've taken some pictures from your site and put them up just for tonight, so people can get a look at some of these crop circles. And I mean, they're absolutely amazing. Now, how far back has this been going on? I mean, how far back does this date to?
I think it's been going back thousands of years, and there's people that are speculating. There's actual academics in the UK and in England that are seriously considering the possibility that the stone circles that they have in England, Avebury and Stonehenge and, hundreds of them, that they think that there's at least a possibility that those stone circles were commemorating crop circles from thousands of years ago. And that's, people other than me that are seriously considering that as a possibility. Now, we know for a fact that there are archival documents that are, around, that there are copies of them in British museums, that prove that, there were pamphlets circulated like old newspapers from 1678 that's the earliest one we have. I think it's probably from much earlier, but we have a printed version from 1678 that shows the mowing devil woodcut, where they have this picture and it looks exactly like a crop circle with the devil doing it, and it tells you a story about a farmer, and the miller was asking too much, and he said, I'd rather have the devil, I think it was a mower, sorry, not the miller. The mower was asking too much, and the farmer says, well, I'd rather have the devil mow it than you. And then that night, he sees a light in the field, and, the next morning, all the crop has changed, and it just describes exactly what we see today as a crop circle, and that's from 1678. And at the end of it, he says he's afraid to go in his own field. And then in 1686, we have an Oxford professor, Robert Plot, and his diagrams of the crop circles, and he believes there's some kind of environmental weather type phenomenon, that's causing it. And in 1800, we have an English journal called Nature that describes exactly a crop circle again, and a listener Reader, I guess, had sent in a story saying, hey, I saw this in my field, what does everyone think? And he describes exactly a crop circle. So here we have not only a history, but I think we have like a Rorschach. If we look at these things, we see the history of our own responses to crop circles, because, that whole devil thing, for example, if you haven't really gotten a little afraid and really considering it, then maybe you haven't really thought about it, because, it's the idea that there's this really other powerful kind of creature out there and they can do these. That's a pretty scary idea on a basic level. I don't think we should be afraid of them, but I think it's one of the natural responses to realizing, hey, there's some big other thing out there. And then we do the thing that we're doing today, which is, Robert Plot in 1686 says, well, it's nature, and like you were describing, people think it's nature, a natural phenomenon. Well, I can tell you that doesn't cut it, and for most of the people that are really looking at the phenomenon, they know that doesn't cut it, because there's too much intention, there's too much on purpose, there's too much exact relationship geometrically between, say, for example, many of the formations and the geometry of surrounding stone circles. So there's nothing accidental about it, and we might say there's some element or some feeling of nature to it, but I don't think it's caused by a natural phenomenon. So.
Yeah, I'm no expert. I certainly haven't done the research you've done, but sensibly thinking, I'd have to say no. That can't be a weather phenomena, or we'd see a lot more of it, wouldn't we? I mean,
and that for me, that's the trip of today. Like you were saying, like you were saying about anything we can't measure doesn't exist. I'll tell you, it's worse than that. We've confused measurement for mastery. We think, our culture today is suffering from an inflation. We're super high on ourselves. And we think that just because we've measured the world, that we've gotten rid of all mystery, all wonder, all darkness, from the world. And so when we think that crop circles are made by nature, what we're actually doing is kind of an inflation to say, well, there's nothing else out there. There's nothing else that could have made it. There's no, in a way, the projection of the devil on it is almost a more truthful thing, because at least we're saying there's something other doing it. Now it's like, oh no, just nature is making this, and we know all about nature, and soon we'll understand this. That's inflation, and that's our society today is very high on itself, very inflated, so high that we think that there's nothing else in the universe that could possibly have the sort of, consciousness that we have. Well, wow. I mean, that's...
Yeah, that is a problem that, a lot of people think that, we're it. Well, God created us and we're it. And I don't. I think that I'll even go as far as say that, maybe God created all life in the universe, but we're not alone. And we're getting messages. And I see those. See, but now here's the thing. Now, people, when you talk about being afraid, there's a part of me that says, what's there to be afraid of? Because if they have the technology to destroy us, and if they wanted to do it, why didn't they do it a long time ago? But then there's this other part of me that says, are these the same ones making the crop circles that are cutting the cows up, with the cattle mutilation, and the abductions? So, it depends how you think about it. So there is something to be afraid of, I guess.
Well, I don't think there really is anything to be afraid of with the other that's making crop circles. And let me tell you why. Okay, first of all, and I don't think it's the same beings that are doing the cattle mutilations, but obviously I don't know. This is just my opinion. Mm-hmm. But they're making things that are beautiful, that are really, really beautiful, that are stunning, that are creative in different shapes and forms we've never seen, that are, they're in a way they're disposable. They get harvested. They're not high on themselves the way we are. We want these, eternal monuments and all this. They're putting them in wheat. They know it's going to be there for a while and then gone. They have sacred geometry in them. There's beautiful balance and harmony with nature. The plants are still alive. But maybe the heaviest idea is that whoever this is obviously trying to not only communicate with us, but to provoke us into engagement, into learning something, into figuring something out, into answering a question, not like solving a puzzle, but answering a deep question and coming to realize something. It's like, I picture sometimes, they're looking at us and seeing this beautiful planet and what we're doing to it, and they're seeing, all the greatness of us and the horribleness of what we're doing. And they can see that, and they're holding that. And whoever's doing this has the, emotional connection to us or the concern for us to go out of their way and offer us this calling card or this message in a way that's designed to, engage and bring us into some sort of transformation or transition or questioning. That's a really heavy thing to think about, and I think it gets me certainly past any ideas of these people being scary or bad.
True, and I kind of picture it, and here's a simple kind of platform, but I picture it as this universal bridge, and there's a troll on that bridge, and he's throwing riddles at us, and we're not crossing that bridge and getting to where they are until we understand the message, maybe. I don't know, and I wonder, do they expect us to understand? I mean, it'd be so much easier if they just communicated across our radios, or something along those lines.
Yeah. Well, it gives you that kind of like, what do they call it on Star Trek? The idea of the prime directive or something. You're not supposed to interfere. Maybe they're bound by one of those contracts or something. But they're certainly not UFOs on the White House lawn. They're inviting us in a subtle way and leaving the question up to each one of us. They're not. They're not.
Has anybody ever recorded one of these? I mean, I've seen videos, but I don't trust a lot of stuff I see online. But I've seen videos where people apparently had cameras out in fields and these things got formed, and you couldn't tell. It's almost like a light maybe came from the sky and did it. Or, I mean, has anyone ever recorded one of these things happening?
Well, you'll find some people that think some of the videos out there of that are real, and I'm not convinced that any of them are, but other people, have been convinced. What we do know is that there's about, I wrote a book on this, and, the website for me is youngandcropcircles.net, JUNG and cropcircles.net, and in my book, I talk about many of the eyewitness accounts. And what's interesting is that they see different things. In 1996, there was one up here, beautiful fractal Julia set formation across from Stonehenge that's humongous and precise and fractal geometry without one little mistake at all. And witnesses were parked at the side of the road, more than one, and a mist came down across the road from Stonehenge, was there for a while, and had a really strange feeling. And everyone watching this, they described kind of expecting almost like an ET to walk out. They're like, you get the feeling that the people had, in that movie, Close Encounters, they have that feeling. They describe that like this mist was weird, and we had a strange feeling about the whole thing. And then the mist left, and then there's this crop circle, a beautiful, precise, very complicated geometrically crop circle. And that's in broad daylight. Multiple witnesses. So other times people have seen a pillar of light come down, and then there's the formation. So they've seen different things, which to me is, again, brings us back to this phenomenon is the way it is on purpose. It's supposed to be a mystery for all of us to participate with. We're not going to just be able to solve it or have someone else solve it for us and now we're good, we got that one figured out. That's not what's happening. So it's being, the ball's put back in our court constantly, and I like that.
Yeah, me too. Now, what about detecting any types of like radiation or anything like that? I mean,
yeah, that's chapter 1 of my book, is the science. And I wrote a master's thesis on it, and I wouldn't have felt comfortable doing that if there wasn't a solid body of science here, and there is. First of all, we've known forever that they've been around, that there's changes physically. The plants aren't broken over. If you go in a fake crop circle, you're going to see some broken, snapped plants. Maybe not all of them, but you're going to see some, especially in certain types of, plants like canola is very breakable. And if there's a crop circle in canola and it's a fake, you're going to see really messed up plants and broken plants. In a real crop circle, the plants are not broken. They're bent over, and often not. They're hard to find, but you will find some that actually have almost a 90-degree bend near the root node of the plant. That is hard, but the plant's still alive. You'll see stretched out nodes or these bent nodes, and how the plants go down is that they're bent. It's as if someone said to each plant, please bend over at 90 degrees and turn this way, and different ones are going this way, and it's a fanned layering. It's just beautiful and wonderful. In fact, there's one from 1999 called the Magic Basket, or I call it the Bread Basket, that's three-dimensionally woven that way. And when I was in a crop circle last summer in England, we found one that had two bends. It was around a corner, and it was bent one way and then the other way. And this is hard. A living stock, we pulled it out from the ground and brought it home with us. But it was, when we took it, it was living but bent twice. Not just lightly bent. It was hard around this corner. So we know there's physical changes. There is, as you were asking about, electromagnetic changes, and we found that for years. In England, in the book, in chapter 2 of the book, I talk about the history, and there's electromagnetic reports from England from the 20s. Canadian, I found, someone gave this to me, but there were reports of, in Manitoba, in the 1970s, people found crop circles out there. They went out there with a Geiger counter. They found radiation levels 4 times higher than normal. They went back 2 weeks later with a provincial geologist, and the radiation levels were still twice as high. And that's in the newspaper from the 70s in Canada from a crop circle report. There's cellular level change. There's germinal changes in how the seeds germinate. If the crop circle comes down early in the growing season, the seeds probably won't germinate. If it comes down late, what you see is the seeds from the center of the formation and from all through it, but especially the center, will grow much faster. So increased, germination rates, which is really interesting. And that might have to do with the cellular changes. Maybe that's allowing more energy to go through there. There's biochemical changes. You can go to bltresearch.com, which I highly recommend you do and support. And they've done wonderful work, but we do find other places that are sources of scientific research as well, but BLT Research is a wonderful resource. Lots of reports there done by them, and including something called soil mineral crystallinity, which was done with the best people in the world on studying that. And we know that there's lots of great science here that shows that there's a genuine mystery going on. So it's exciting. We can move on from there because we know there's something that's going on.
Yeah, it is exciting. It's fantastic, is what it is. Now, somebody, one of our listeners, anyways, asked who's doing this, and I guess that's the big question, right? I mean, nobody really has that answer, do they?
No, nobody does. Yeah, nobody does. Certainly not me. We don't know who's doing it, and other than seeing a UFO when I was a kid, I've never, which I saw, was reported in the paper the next day. Thousands of people saw it in the city that I was growing up in. And other than that, I've never seen, one being made, or I can't tell you who's doing it. But like I said, I really think that it's about us being led into a process of wonder, and our culture needs that. As I said, I think that's the primary thesis of my book. One of the things I'm really trying to communicate to folks is that I think this is meant to be as it is, and here we are thinking we have all the answers, and here comes something knocking on our door that says we don't.
Right. Now, I'm sure people have tried to, I guess, figure these things out. I mean, have we come to any conclusions on what's being said or what's being told to us in any of these crop circles?
You mean in interpreting them?
Yeah, interpretation.
Yeah, I mean, it's not really my thing, to do that. There are people that do that really well, but the interpreting individual ones is not what I do. You can go online and find tons of that. If you go to the, there's a great crop circle database online and the crop circle connector and those places, and you can go and look and you'll find lots of reports and interpretations and all that, and that's wonderful. But like I said, I'm kind of trying to cover all the other ground, which is, symbolically, where do we go? Psychologically, where do we go? And so I look really more at the symbolic aspects and at the phenomenon in general. So my trip is around, if the world was the dreamer and this was the dream, as a Jungian psychologist, where dreams are so important to us in dream interpretation, how would I interpret it? Well, there's two basic things that are really important. One, they're called crop circles. Okay, so circle. Here we have these things that certainly were circular to start with, that have a centeredness to them. They have a sacred geometry. A lot of our stained glass windows and religious sacred expressions have the same sort of centeredness. You have four circles or things that are, have a perfect centered geometry. And Carl Jung talked a lot about those kind of symbols, and he's, mandalas and that kind of thing that really takes him, like, think of the Tibetan mandalas. Crop circles are a lot like those Tibetan mandalas. They have this beautiful depth to them and this precision and serenity. And, for Carl Jung, he talked about this as the self archetype, which is the biggest part of us that connects both the unconscious and the conscious, the whole of who we are. And we use those symbols both as objects of religious contemplation and as healing devices. In Navajo tradition, they put people in the mandala. And we definitely are out of balance. We definitely need to be brought back to balance as a culture. And here's something that at least has some of that flavor of healing and of coming back to balance and of remembering the sacred, which we have lost. Now, the other piece for me is that they're in grain. They're in living stalks of grain and plant materials. And, our culture has also lost our connection to nature and the miracle of life. And when we think and look at the mythology of grain, we find goddess symbols primarily. And in the old traditions in the ancient world, they used to celebrate the seed that grows in the ground and the miracle of it coming back to life. And that's something to do archetypally with the feminine inside of ourselves. And we've boy, are we, disconnected from that. We're sort of a hyper-masculine, hyper-rational, hyper-linear, we always want a solution kind of culture. And here's this thing that is right ingrained that used to be so much connected with the feminine and the mystery of the miracle of life. And aren't we, that we're made from that too, and we've lost that half of ourselves. And, one of the ways we can know that is, for example, something like the word materialism. Mm-hmm. Now, we're very compulsive about materialism. And if you look at that word, materialism, the first part, mater, in Latin, that means mother. And, we're very compulsive about our materialism. We're trying to, we want it real bad. So, even our Thanksgiving holiday, well, what's that about? It's about shopping. Okay, so, we're expressing our desire for the archetypal feminine, for this sort of miracle of life, thankfulness and gratitude and connection. We're expressing it compulsively through things like materialism. So, here's this phenomenon that is celebrating or highlighting, the wonder of nature, and we desperately need to come back to that and discover it for ourselves and participate in our own way, whether that's religious or personal or whatever, but just to have that gratitude and be have a living connection to it, I think is part of what's being pointed to there.
Oh, you're absolutely right. Humanity has gone off course completely. This right now, as far as we know anyways, is the only planet we have to live on. And, we're cutting down the trees, we're poisoning the water, we're polluting the air, we're doing everything we shouldn't be doing. And it's like, I don't know, I think there's a portion of humanity who feel like they're God, like they are the gods. They can create.
Exactly.
Yeah. And, that's a big mistake.
Yeah. And those are the kind of mistakes that tend to get your butt kicked by the universe.
And everybody else's butt going right along with you.
Exactly. All the ancient myths tell us when people get too high on themselves, they get knocked down.
That's right.
So,
we've got
comeuppance coming. Hopefully it won't be too bad.
We've got mad scientists who are, cloning human beings. We know that they've done work in that area. Of course, controlling the weather, and it seems like they want to complete all these tests. And once they do, they believe they're God. I mean, you've got Monsanto, who's creating this genetically modified food. Like, well, Mother Nature, we don't need you no more. We can do without you. And it's all going down a really deep slope that is into burning coals, I'm afraid.
I agree with you, and I think Jung certainly thought that was it too. He had a great way of saying this. He said something that he said, we're the most wonderful fulfillment of all the expectations of all the generations of life before us. And we're also the disappointment of all those hopes. And he was writing that around the time of World War I. So, we're all of the goodness of the human capacity, but we're also the absolute shadow of all that. And that's a very heavy idea to hold in your mind. But I think that's our time, is holding both those things. And I see crop circles and the mystery of synchronicity and the way that quantum physics suggests that, or actually proves that, that matter and psyche are one field, that the brain isn't limited to the body, that psyche extends beyond us. All those things, for me, point to a new worldview in which we see that, we're connected with this really mysterious world that actually, is about creation of meaning and values our emotional state, as well as everything else about us. And that's sort of one light side of the coin of the things that we're figuring out today. Well, the dark side is all this other stuff that we're talking about, the destruction of the environment and all that we have to face this horrible stuff we're doing and these wonderful possibilities of who we maybe really are. And both of these things are coming to us at this time. But I'll tell you what they both do is they both bring us back down to reality and both make us value the real lives, our real struggles, the real things we're all going through, and, you know, seeing the dark side of what we're doing as a culture. And you have to come down to earth, and that's what we desperately need. And I think I see that happening both with the crop circles and the other mysteries we're facing today, and with the, you know, the shadow of what our culture is doing to the earth and all that. So, you know, I think all those take us in a downward movement, which we really need.
Yeah, and you know what concerns me is that if these crop circles, and I believe they are messages from somewhere, then and we've got fashions who are trying to cover them up and make light of them and send people out there to make it look like hoaxes. You know, this might be messages we really need to have, and it's being held from us, and you know that's never a good thing either. So, you know, I look at these crop circles sometimes and I try to figure them out, and it comes down to a person's interpretation, you know, so it's really not fair for one person to look at something and say, well, I've got it figured out. This is what they're telling us, because it's probably based on his beliefs. So, you know, what we need is some really good minds to come together and figure these out if they are really messages. Because
well, I think the thing too for me is that, you know, people can, like your listeners can go online themselves, go to my website and look at the pictures there, or go to a online database and look through whole years of them and just look at each one and just participate. You're really, you know, just looking at them as a way of participating with them, and allow yourself to feel how that feels to do that. And you know, I think that we can have a transformational experience just based on our own, you know, aesthetic and feeling connection with these images, and a lot can happen for people from that.
Absolutely. Gary, hang on with us for a moment. We've got to take a break. So, okay, with that, Gary, tell me a little bit more about your research, and I mean, where you actually do public speaking on this. Is that right? You have workshops as well?
Yeah, I do. And I was at the Glastonbury Symposium this summer in England, which is hosted by Andy Thomas. That some of your listeners will know who he is. He's probably the biggest name in the crop circle world, and he's written lots of books on crop circles, including Vital Signs, and he writes books on conspiracy theories as well today, and that's more his thing today. And he's one of the guests on the webinar that's coming up starting next Sunday for six weeks, every Sunday starting January 19th, and he's the second guest, I believe. So I spoke at his conference, which is the Glastonbury Symposium, and it was great to be over there, and I got to go to England's crop circles and visit them, and I also got to go and visit these really interesting paintings that I found right after I did this work as a master's thesis. I found totally by accident in this library in California this document that showed an English woman therapist's dreams of these images of a UFO and two women standing on a hill and this swirling grain. And to me, this was so close to crop circles, you know, the UFO and swirling grain, and the UFO comes down to Earth and it swirls around and becomes like a flower, and then these women figures are moving, and there's a series of dreams through it. But this woman's analyst was Tony Wolff, who was very close to Carl Jung. And when Tony Wolff died, the woman came over to Switzerland and looked at these pictures that she had painted with Carl Jung, and Carl Jung and his wife were both really moved by them, and they really thought there was something profound about these dreams that this woman was having in England. And Jung was so blown away by these dream paintings that he used one of them for the cover of his book on UFOs, which came out in the early 50s. And so I got to actually see those, which was wonderful. And to me, they were, you know, finding them was kind of confirmation that I was on the right path with writing this book. And it was really moving to me to actually see them in color. I'd only seen them in black and white. And those images are up on my Facebook page now, which is facebook.com/Jung and Crop Circles, Jung and Crop Circles. And So that was really a big one for me. But yeah, I go and talk all over. I speak in LA. I've spoken in lots of places in the States and Canada, and it's wonderful. People are blown away when you show them the science. Even the science and the history is the first half of my presentation, and by the first half, people are blown away. That there really is a lot of science that just shows us that there's something going on here. That's enough to make people really have their worldview popped.
Oh, I imagine it is. And apparently the science really doesn't prove that this is anything natural at all. That, maybe the earth itself is trying to give us messages, and that would be assuming, that crowd that says, well, earth is alive, and maybe she's communicating. But you think it goes far beyond that. And, I do too. I think that it has to do with UFO activity. I don't know what else it could be. I just,
Yeah, well, one of the things that I think is really cool for people to check out if they want to go deeper into this topic is the balls of light, the connection to balls of light. So what are balls of light? Well, in England and in North America, there's, we talk about the will-o-wisp or the whip-poor-will, or, there's a Swedish word for them, a German word for them. So for a long time, people in the country have occasionally seen these balls of light, which are usually, people describe it being about a foot, across, and a sort of orange or white glowing ball that moves around. Well, people have caught these on videotape now, and they've caught them in videotape around crop circles. There seems to be some sort of connection or fascination of the balls of light with the crop circles, or however you want to say it. There's a connection. And the first guest we have in the webinar on the first session next Sunday is Suzanne Taylor. And I don't know if you've had her on your show, but she's a producer of 2 crop circle documentaries that are wonderful. Quest for Truth, which I highly recommend.
Susan Taylor, you said?
The first film she did is called Crop Circles Quest for Truth. Okay. And her name is Suzanne Taylor. She's the first guest. And so we'll show some clips from her documentaries. Actually, we'll probably show them throughout the webinar. And her second movie is What on Earth? And her website is cropcirclemovie.com. And so on the extra features to the first one, you can watch British military helicopters chasing these balls of light. And it is very cool to see. I mean, she has footage in the movie of balls of light, but they put the military helicopters chasing balls of light on as an extra feature, and boy, it makes it worth your money right there. And you can actually see the ball of light whipping along, and you see a military helicopter right after it, real close to the ground. And it's not just one time or one incident. It's multiple incidents that people, crop circle, hunters or crop circle chasers or crop circle researchers have, been going out to formation, and whoa, what's that? A helicopter. Well, what's it doing? Well, it's chasing that ball of light. Can you see the ball of light? There it is. And, you hear the people, that are shooting the footage talking about, oh, there's the ball of light, and there's the helicopter, and then you see it. I mean, it's amazing. And so there's big stuff going on here, and definitely the governments know, and they're interested, and they're not telling anybody anything, that's for sure. But you can see for yourself, and I think that's what it's all about, is all of us having our own experience and our own participation. I think it really, really, another way I would tell your listeners that's really important to understand is that there seems to be something that happens, first of all, in the whole world, but also with crop circles. There's, synchronicity happens, and synchronicity doesn't happen just any old thing, and it doesn't happen because you're thinking about something. It happens because you have a feeling connection to things. So you break up with somebody and you run into them all over town. Yeah. Synchronicity, it only happens when there's feeling involved. So in the crop circle world, what we see is researchers having these sort of synchronicities with the phenomenon, where Colin Andrews, a very famous crop circle researcher that I'm sure you know of, he, 1 year, 30 years ago, couldn't afford to go all over England driving around chasing crop circles. Well, what happens? He gets one close to his home. But that happened after he really expressed his own, anger over his plight or his frustration, and then he gets his crop circle close by. The very famous Nancy Talbot, who is the T in BLT research, who again I recommend your listeners check out the bltresearch.com website. She was in Holland at a farm where they get crop circles all the time, and she, got, upset and just said, why can't this phenomenon be more direct, What's up with all this pussyfooting around? And she was all, fired up about this and, frustrated. Well, that night she had an eyewitness experience. And I will tell you this, if the phenomenon is connected to those people and has some value for their own emotional process with the phenomenon, then it values everybody's. That means that all of our consideration on some level matters. And I think that's part of the new worldview we're discovering today, that our own emotional participation with these questions matters on an objective way. And I think that's a really cool way of looking at the world, and I think it's true. And that's what we're unfolding today. That's the new the new version of the world is flat. Well, the world is flat idea is, the world we're being sold by all the institutions that says, the mass population worldview that we have today. But this new worldview is coming, out where every single person's investigation and participation matters. And I think it matters your emotional involvement too. For me, it can't just be mental. I think we have to participate with the whole of who we are. And I think that's great,
I agree. And you had mentioned the government and their interest, and I'm wondering just how interested are they? I mean, we know they take a big interest in the UFO phenomena, even though they tried to deny it. So how big of an interest have you found that they take in these crop circles? And, I mean, is there any information on any of the research that they've done?
Well, there isn't any information on the research that they've done, but we know they're interested, and I write about that in the book. They're definitely interested, and all the researchers, the big ones especially, will tell you that, back in the day when it was getting big, the government would come and say, oh, hey, how's it going? What are you finding? They wanted to hear what they were saying, and then at a certain point, they just turned them all off, and, some of them will even tell you, Colin Andrews has all kinds of stories, saying that he was intimidated by people claiming to be government officials to not continue his research. So they're definitely interested, and we don't know what they know, but I'll tell you, they know a heck of a lot more than we know, and they know that something is really going on with both UFOs and crop circles.
Yeah, I would agree that they know a whole lot more. Now, this is a worldwide phenomenon, correct? I mean, this isn't just something happening, say, in the UK or in England or here in the United States. I mean, this is worldwide.
It is worldwide. Yeah, there have been great crop circles in Asia in the last couple of years, which is interesting. There's one, if you look it up, you'll see one from Indonesia. There's been one in Korea in 2008 that was huge in rice. Across Europe, it has been going on for a long time, but it seems like more and more lately Europe has been taking off. There's a beautiful one in 2012 in Italy, but there's been multiple ones there this year, and Poland and France and Holland, and all across Europe they're getting crop circles, as they have for a couple decades now. But lately they've been getting even more beautiful and wonderful, and we have a history of it in North America too. There's been crop circles in the USA. There was the Gray, Tennessee one, I think last year. Last year there was also one in Washington State. We've had them in Canada and Saskatchewan and Manitoba and British Columbia on Vancouver Island. And it's an international thing, but there's certain geological conditions that have to be in place, so it doesn't happen just anywhere. But it is worldwide.
I see. Now, what was I gonna? I just had something on the tip of my tongue here. With these crop circles, okay. I'm wondering now, have any of the designs have they been repeated? Like, are there any two crop circles that were identical, maybe in separate parts of the world?
Well, not quite identical, but there's a neat guy named Andreas Mueller, and Andreas Mueller observed that there seems to be this weird pattern where there'll be three in a row of a similar design, but they won't come necessarily in the order you'd expect. You might find, the most complicated one comes first, and then they get simpler, or there's a strange way that it's inverted through time, but he did notice that there seems to be like patterns of three artistically that can be in different countries or that kind of thing, or in the same locations. But there are echoes, but never quite exactly the same thing. But you will find a formation in Germany might be similar to a one done in England the year before, or something like that. So you do find some echo, but not repetition.
Well, I was thinking that if they were given the same, putting the same design down in different places, then maybe it could have been some kind of warning. And, they're like, all right, these people are too idiotic to get the message. Let's try here. But if that's not the case, then I don't know. I do see it as some kind of messages to us. And, and you mentioned the light, the balls of light. Now, I've had a few UFO sightings of my own, and one was absolutely amazing. And it was huge. It was like probably the size of maybe 2 football fields in the sky, and it was maybe 80 feet up in the air. I mean, it wasn't that far up, and it was just like the most brilliant colors and energy. I mean, what didn't look like a solid object. It just looked like fluorescent light flying through the sky is almost what it looked, but brilliant color. And it was huge. So I wonder, if they're able to, maybe they're interdimensional.
Yeah, and that's what I mean about people asking their questions is, let's just participate and go a little deeper, because when you're describing what you saw, I really get a sense of it. And but I think people that haven't had that experience, often people want to just stop the process too early. They use a word like aliens, like a cork on a bottle, to just, this huge idea like the word alien, and just they use that little word just to hold back their own anxiety and their own questions. Instead, just open the bottle and just look at your own process and think about what you mean. Because when you describe what you saw, I get a really clear picture of something. And I think people who haven't had that experience, they got to allow their imagination to do part of the work for them.
Yeah, and when I seen this thing, I mean, I was outside and I banged on the wall out there, and I'm telling my wife, get outside, you got it. And I really thought she was going to miss it. And she got out there in time to see me chasing it across the field out here. It was like a kid on Christmas. I mean, I just couldn't believe what I was seeing. And, even today now, when I think back of it, I want to pinch myself and say, was that real? But it was. We both seen it, clear as day. And I've gone to the UFO reporting center, and I've seen that other people have reported something similar. And, but yet you don't see it on the news because the media is all controlled. And I guess we'll never get the answers unless we get them. I had Steve Bassett on last night, and, he's worked hard at trying to get this truth embargo thing going. And my opinion, I don't see the government ever admitting to any of it. I don't expect Obama to come out and say, hey, guess what, guys, by the way, we're not alone. It's just not going to happen.
I think one of them might eventually. I don't think it's going to happen in the next 2 years.
No, I don't either. And, Steve did make a good point, though. It would be in their best interest to tell us about it before we find out on our own, when they all, maybe just decide to land one day. Because then it's going to be total chaos. Because I've spoke to plenty who think that, aliens, ETs, they're fallen angels, they're demons, they're coming to eat us or kill us or whatever it is. And I've always been under the impression that, if that was the case, why wait until we get more technically advanced? Why not take us out 10 years ago? Or why not take us out now if that's what they wanted to do? So, it's a real big mystery. It's a puzzle, and it depends on who you ask as to what their agenda is. And I really don't know. I'd like to find out, though. I'm not going to run from them. I'd like to sit down with one.
Mm-hmm. Is that Steve Bassett from SETI? Is he that?
Yeah.
Who that is?
From the PGR, I think it is. I don't know if we had anything to do with SETI. Maybe.
Okay.
Yeah.
I think, in terms of the sort of president talking about it, I think, one day it might be like the sort of like the new pope that there is. You might just get someone in there who's so different who just starts, letting a lot of that stuff out, because we're getting to be. I think we've been able to handle the truth the whole time, but you never know. You can get someone in there one day and they're just like, look, we got to move forward on this and just be honest. It could happen.
Right. And I think there is a certain portion of the population that wouldn't be able to handle it. And we have doctors for those people. I want the truth at any cost. If it turns out that, that's where we came from or any of that, I don't care. It's not going to crush me. I just want to know. I want to know who they are. I want to know that there's other options other than just Earth, because we're destroying this planet.
Yeah. I think that could happen. I'm hopeful, but it's certainly not. This. I think that our time is about the little guy. I think that when I look at our history, one of the things that I see is that we're in a time when the old authority figures don't exist. So if you look at the White House 50 years ago, or maybe Eisenhower's era or something like that, we used to think, geez, wow, well, that place is just full of goodness and radiates, just a great, sort of spiritual and moral purity. Well, nobody thinks that anymore. And it's the same thing with, the Vatican and the Wall Street. People used to think these were just great institutions and wow, they're going to just sure take care of everything for us.
Yeah.
And no one thinks that anymore. And if you look at our history, really, 5 years ago, people thought better of them. 10 years ago, 15. There's little changes that just come down over time where, all these old, I would say, masculine type authorities that we used to have are just crumbling away in their authority over time. And even, the masculine heroes, even our sports heroes, they're just, every week there's a new sports hero gets knocked off the pedestal and we put them on. And I think that that's what our era is about. And the only heroes we seem to have are these kind of anti-heroes like Assange and Snowden that are bursting the bubble on stuff. So it's like almost the time, this sort of anti-hero moment in our culture, and the tables are turning, and so it's not going to be the White House that's going to solve these problems for us. I think it's going to be people doing it for themselves, and whatever that means. And I think that's the nature of our era.
Oh, absolutely. And quite frankly, personally, my personal feeling on it is that the White House is a lot of the problem, what they're doing there in the military-industrial complex. And if we would stop spending so much money on killing each other and we actually put it to good use for all of humanity, there's no telling where we'd be, how far advanced we'd be right now, and what we'd know. But unfortunately, there is that good side and that evil side. And the evil side is collapsing. And that's why I worry even more now, because they get desperate. They don't want to lose their control and their power.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Yep.
So now, a question that came in from one of our chat rooms was, could it be, and of course, I guess it could be anything, but could it be God literally putting these messages on this planet for us, these crop circles?
Yeah, absolutely. And the thing I would say is that the same thing I said about aliens is what I would say about God. What does the listener mean when they ask that question? What do they picture? Because I think that you can use the word God the same way you use the word aliens. You can use it as a cork to keep a genie in a bottle. You can use it as a way to keep something that's a big, scary question that produces anxiety in you, and you can keep it at bay, or you can use that word as something that's really powerful and makes your life, more alive and, filled with mystery and, health and, passionate questioning and all that kind of good stuff. So, you can use these words different ways, but in general, I think there's three general categories that the researchers that are serious about crop circles will say. That there feels like there's something spiritual going on, that it feels like there's something extraterrestrial going on, and that it feels something is connected to the earth. And you take those three, ingredients or those three categories and you whip them up, and you're getting close. But, nobody has all the answers here. And I think, a lot of our pictures about, the world beyond the human are going to go from maybe like a childish view to a more adult. Like a child looking to an adult. Now I think we're going into this adult age. So we're coming to, really see that there really is something out there and kind of know it more consciously and know it as like an adult to an adult, not a kid to an adult. Like we're finding these mysteries out about the universe, but we're finding them out in a grown-up way. And I think, that for me is kind of, I think the danger with going into like trying to solve all of the things is that it's almost like we're being kids and we're trying to like put on a good show for the parents, Oh, I solved it, I figured it, well, okay, that's great, but now let's try and be a full-grown adult and say, what is going on here? And it's not about trying to look smart, it's about trying to stand up and look and feel and go, wow, what is really, it's a different energy, and I think we're at the time of a more conscious, grown-up interaction with these mysteries. And when we, I can't tell you what is on the other side of the curtain, but I feel like we're in this moment of change, and I can talk about that. I can talk about psychology, and I can talk about, the kind of arc of our history. Like I talked about the idols changing and the masculine inflation, and there's certain qualities we can see in our psychology that are real. We're not coming from nowhere. We're coming from somewhere, and we can look at the psychology, and that's really what I do in the book, is try and draw the context of these things out. What is the surrounding? What is the, the field in which this is happening? What does that look like psychologically? So, I think there's a lot of it has to do with kind of coming into maturity in our relationship with the universe and with the planet and ourselves.
Yeah, and and what an interesting time we live in too, because there was a time when we couldn't talk about things like this without people smirking at us or trying to suggest the white coat. And and now we're learning that there are a lot of true mysteries right here on this planet. I mean, we don't even have to leave the planet
right.
to find. I mean, there's just so much here. When it talk about the ghost phenomena and the UFO phenomena, I mean, all that stuff is so real, and yet there's people who just refuse to accept it. That
and that is a kind of fundamentalism.
Yeah.
One of the big issues going on that I'm around is that, the whole skeptical fundamentalists, the people that just won't believe in anything other than their own skeptical religion, which is they think that the brain is the end of consciousness and all that, and none of this parapsychological or weird stuff can happen. Well, that's just religion. It's just a religion. It's a religion of reason. And they think they have all the answers, and they don't. If you put God in a box and you think that you've got it, well, that's idolatry. It's if you think you have all the answers, that's inflation. That's grandiosity. That's ego inflation. It's a kind of craziness.
Right.
We live in a world full of questions. So the skeptical folks, they really don't like it when people talk about this stuff, and boy, do they ever get upset. The event I spoke at in LA this summer was supposed to be a TEDx event, and TED pulled the license 2 weeks before because we had some pretty heavy speakers out there, including a guy named Russell Targ, who worked for, 2.5 decades for the government doing remote viewing exercises that were so successful that there was a congressional hearing into their work because they thought there was a Russian mole in the project because they were getting such accurate descriptions of these Russian sites through psychic viewing. Well, and this is all public record. I mean, people can look this stuff up. This guy worked for the government. He's not a nutbar. He was on a government salary for, 2.5 decades doing psychic research for the government. So, and Ted, that freaked Ted out. I don't know if other speakers did too, and they pulled the name 2 weeks before the event, and that's ended up being called Brother, Can You Spare a Paradigm? And you can watch all those videos. They're out there on Vimeo. But that was a really cool event. But, Ted has this whole skeptical trip going on in them, and because they have a big contingent of skeptical people. And so they pulled Rupert Sheldrake's talk from England in the spring of last year, and Graham Hancock's, because they were so threatened by the content. These skeptical fundamentalists, they don't have a problem with their people's methods, which is what they always say they do. What they really have a problem with is their results. They don't like the conclusions people end up with. And it's just a kind of religion. I mean, it's I don't think it should be taken seriously. And it happens on Wikipedia, too. There's a big organized group, a skeptical community that makes Wikipedia totally useless for anything cutting edge. If you look at crop circles on Wikipedia, there's no good material there because the skeptics pull it all down.
You're absolutely right. And this was proven to me because I have a good friend, Dr. Leonard Horowitz, and there's a Wikipedia page on him, and they give him no rights whatsoever to change anything. So somebody just takes control of that and puts up whatever they feel should go up there, whether it be crop circles or you. and you have no say-so over it. And that's why when people quote Wikipedia, I kind of chuckle a little bit. It's like that's about as fake as the news you turn on at night.
Yeah, it's certainly not. I mean, it's controlled by people, and there is an active group of skeptical fundamentalists who control, and take down anything that's interesting in terms of research on the cutting edge of consciousness or parapsychology or these other phenomenon. They take it all down, and they can, and there's nothing people can do about it. So, when it comes to anything cutting edge, TED and Wikipedia are not the places to go.
Oh, I absolutely agree. No argument here. And, I had a guest on, several months ago. Matthew, might have been Harper. I forget his last name now. But he didn't believe in anything. He just believed that, we're here. We grew from some kind of bacteria and, and here we are. And, I mean, he wouldn't take a concept of there being another side, whether, a spiritual side or dimensional or anything like that. And, and when it comes to the belief in God, he says, well, we were designed like that because, how could we go on thinking that we're just going to die and that's it? He says, well, we have to believe that there's something special to us. And I mean, it didn't matter what you threw his way. He just wasn't going to believe any of it. I had fun talking to him, actually, because I couldn't believe that somebody could be so closed-minded on things, but he is. And there's a lot.
Yeah, one of the most interesting things for me is, with the crop circles is that, they have had very religious imagery in them, but it's not just one religion. Multiple religions. You've seen there have been crosses and menorahs and Buddhist symbols and other things in there, and you don't have to change religions to really participate with this thing. Some of my biggest influences in Jungian psychology, a lot of the things that you're hearing today have been strongly influenced by them, are really strong Christians and really strong Jungians. But the thing they don't do is they don't make everything literal, and they don't put God in a box and say, I've got all the answers. They look at it as a day-to-day process of engaging with the universe and not having the answers, and you can participate that as a person of faith or not. It's that's you don't have to give anything up to be involved here, and I think that's wonderful. It's just questions. None of this disproves any religious or.
Oh, you there with us?
Yeah, I'm there. I heard it.
Oh, okay. Because you cut out a little
I'm here.
bit. Oh, hey, Peter. We've got a call here too. Peter Kling, welcome aboard.
My pleasure, Michael. I've been listening to the program, and this is something, as we mentioned, or I mentioned to you last night, I wanted to bring up about the whole alien thing, or UFOs disclosures, was crop circles, and lo and behold, here you had a guest. So it was actually great timing. But Gary, I'm enjoying the way that you're presenting this. It's a very interesting way of, I'll say, what would be the best way to put it? Objective. It's a very objective way. You're looking at what's there, and it's not, you're not making any really hard conclusions other than, guess what? There seems to be some other intelligent life form involved here, and they're sending us messages, and maybe we should pay attention. Well, gee, isn't that what every holy book in the world says?
Sure.
So to think that we are the only ones in the universe is ludicrous.
Mm-hmm.
And then, they say, well, we're the only ones in the universe. No, there's got to be other life forms out there. But, okay, they look beyond Earth, but they never look beyond the third dimension, because it's still a theory that we need 7 other dimensions in order to exist, and there's probably more life in those 7 other dimensions, intelligent life, than there is in these 3. So,
well, you know what the big argument usually
we
is?
We can't eliminate anything.
Peter, what you'll get, a lot of these geniuses will say, well, we can't get there, so there's no way they can get. They might be out there, but they're not coming here. They can't get here. Just because we can't do it, they don't think that nobody else can.
Well,
Yeah. Go ahead, Peter.
I was going to say, something I wrote in Letters to Earth was that SETI has spent all this money using 3-dimensional instruments to look for something out there that's 3-dimensional.
Mm-hmm.
How could they ever find something that is beyond 3 dimensions if their instruments only go to 3 dimensions?
Mm-hmm.
They're leaving out the other 7. It's like, if you don't see it in the visible light, it doesn't exist.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yes.
So, the one question, when you look at when you look at all of the crop circles, and I've seen, so many different theories when people try to decode what they're saying, but overall, I would say, there's some other entity involved that's trying to give us some message, but what do you perceive that message as being?
Well, my answer, and I really appreciate your question, Peter, and I really, I'm picking up what you're putting down, and I appreciate, the good things you're saying there. Thank you. As I've been saying, I think it's more than, it's not something, I don't get it as something we're supposed to decode. I don't see my job here as trying to give you a little pill in the form of my book that's going to give you, all the answers to what crop circles is. I think we're being invited to a process, and I think that it's a personal process, and that journey is going to be different for me than it is for anyone else who's listening. But it's a process. In my book, I'm trying to build a framework to deepen people's appreciation. So I give them stuff about the archetypal feminine and explain why I think we're in an archetypally masculine imbalance in our culture and why that's important psychologically. But that's just a framework for their own questioning. So what I believe we're being offered or served up is something that is potentially transformative of us. People say the purpose of art is to transform the viewer, and this is art, and it's about emotion and heart engagement. I really believe we're discovering a heart-shaped world where our felt engagement with the world, bring synchronicities into occurrence that are meaningful and all that. But emotion and heart and art is a big piece of that. And I think our culture totally devalues that completely and devalues each one of us. We're only valuable as utilitarian economic units of production and gain and money, and we're only, the rich are the best and the poor are crap. That's what our culture teaches us, and it's sick. Every human being is got, a part of spark of the divine, and, it's a wonderful, magical mystery that we're all involved in. And so, I think we're being invited to a process of rediscovering ourselves and rediscovering the world.
I think that's going to happen rather soon. I don't know if it'll be totally through the crop circles, but I believe it's going to happen soon.
Yeah, I hope so. And, I'm not trying to give any answers. I'm just trying to serve up questions.
Well, here's the thing. And I was raised with a 15-year education in the scriptures, not religious, historical and prophetic. And then I spent quite a few years learning the sciences, and really have never stopped learning anything, and try to learn it as much as I can. But after 35 years of scientific investigation in the scriptures, looking for scientific evidence of what is there, removing anything that is, quote, holy, I guess you would say I took the deist view of the Bible, only I didn't cut out the miracles. I tried to answer them because I was a scientist. In science, there aren't any miracles. It's just you either find the right formula or you don't. And it's through research and development that you're able to get the right formula. And that just happened to be where I was working, is in research and development. So I already had that mindset. And I said, okay, look, you grew up with the test tube in one hand and the Bible in the other hand. It's time to bring the two of them together. And you find when you do it that way, you find that there's been a 6,000-year involvement, more than actually that, but at least a 6,000-year involvement of recorded history of recorded history of alien involvement in human affairs. And we've based world religions on these basic teachings, but the world religions try to cover all the gods that are out there. And you see, now you're dealing with all these different gods as opposed to the creator of everything, the Alpha and the Omega. So, yeah, as you say, we're part of that divine. And scientifically, we can, once you decode first you have to remove the religion out of the Bible, and then you start to decode what's written in there. And for your edification, Genesis, and I've said this on our program, Michael's and mine, that we have on Wednesday nights, Genesis 2:21 through 23. God says it's not good for the man to be alone. So what does he do? Puts him to sleep, opens up the flesh, removes a tissue sample, closes the flesh, sends the man on his way, sends the tissue sample down to genetic engineering with a note saying, let's make a female version of one of these. And so genetic engineering takes it. They swap out the X chromosome or the Y chromosome for an X chromosome. They turn around, they put it in the shake and bake, and it comes out a female a few months later, and they give it to the man. The man says, hey, finally, you guys are done. At last, this is flesh of my flesh and bone of my bone. This one was taken from man. I will call her woman. She's my clone. So now, wait a minute. We just answered one of the first miracles of the Bible. It's not a miracle. It's genetic engineering. Who are the genetic engineers? Who's involved here? And when you go back through the fossil record, you could say, wow, there's been a lot of genetic engineering on this planet. We just happen to change the name to, evolution. Now we don't have to answer to anybody. It just happened by itself.
Right, and what we've turned that into is I think we made a sacred cow out of our own creativity, and that we're worshiping ourselves.
That's in essence, I have to agree, because you look at the pomp and ceremony that is around the rulers of this world, and how that is broadcast to the masses around the planet. Let's go back 2 years to First, it was Prince Charles' birthday. Then it was the Queen's Golden Jubilee. Then it was the Olympics. And all eyes were focused on the royal family ever since, almost. You know?
Yeah. Yeah, well, we're a culture that celebrates our own selves, money and technology and human creativity, and have lost, the idea that there's something else out there. I think, there's no question to me that there's some sort of mechanism of evolution that goes on. Okay, that's great. But to me, I feel like there's, this is my own personal answer, that there's some sort of kind of light of consciousness that's like a light to a moth to the flame, that the process we're in, called nature, brings us into higher forms of greater consciousness. And, so you could say that we're drawn to like some sort of God or spiritual light in terms of our movement into greater consciousness, but we're also driven biologically like evolution. And that's my sort of push and pull answer. And that's great. And I think everybody can have their own answer to it. And that's wonderful. But that's what, comes to mind when I hear what you're talking about.
Yeah, and that I think is, when you go back and what you mentioned earlier about these crop circles kind of putting forth this image of love, it all comes back to that same thing. And when we look at what's gone on here on the planet for the past 6,000 years, and you look at the record of what's actually in the scriptures, something happened where the human mind went from the alpha speed, which is where love resides, into the beta operating speed or vibration, which is where fight and flight reside. And it's tied around this evil fruit of duality, knowing good and bad, but it goes beyond that. You see, we stop there. And we look at the third dimensional story and we say, yeah, right, okay. But we forget the divinity of where we came from and what is actually going on behind the scenes, because this alleged fruit all ties in with extraterrestrial beings. So it's like, okay, what's going on? They took us out of alpha, they put us into beta, and we've been in beta for the last 6,000 years, killing each other and running away from each other. It's going on now in Africa, where in South Sudan, that there's the next hot spot, that there's mass murder going on by the military fighting each other and people fleeing out of the country. We watched it happen in Syria, and it's still going on in Syria, but it's gone on all through the Middle East, where you've got that fight or flight response, and it's gone on all through history for 6,000 years.
Yeah, and the Jungian way of approaching that story would be, and I certainly tell this in my talks, which is that, you can look at the story of the masculine and feminine, that we all begin in sort of a unity between the mother and the child, and that's where all our cultures start off, and where the primitive man walks around the world and he sees everything as full of magic and awe, and that's called magical thinking, and we think everything is magical because we don't have discrimination and objectivity and ego strength, yeah. And then, cultures and the human race has gone on this journey out of that kind of primitive state into science and morality and objectivity and law and rationality, and developed these really strong egos. But, as that has happened, especially in the last couple hundred years, we've gone past this kind of optimal phase into an imbalance phase where that objectivity, we have too much of it. We're separated from the world. We're disconnected inside ourselves. The emotion and the instinct is separated too much from the mind. So, we can have something that we should react to emotionally, and we don't. And without that emotion, we're not really participating fully. And so we have too much of this masculine, the rationality, the linearity. We're allergic to mystery. So I see this as bringing the bridegroom back to the bride and getting him prepared for two conscious beings coming together. Our culture being like the groom, being brought back and prepared for the bride, and the bride's just the world. The bride is just reality. The bride is, sure, it's the extraterrestrials, but it's also, the fact that we live in a heart-shaped world, that, whereas we see in synchronicity that our emotional.
I'm sorry, I love it because I'm thinking the words and you're saying them. Yeah, seriously, and I'll tell you what I'm thinking about. When you mentioned before you mentioned the bride, the bride of Christ, or the Christ and the bride, the bridegroom and the bride, however you want to divide it up. It's okay. It's not going to be divided much longer. But it goes back to the beginning between in the first prophecy written in the scriptures in Genesis 3:15, where, okay, now they ate the damn fruit and Yahweh's pissed. And so he's talking to the serpent. And he says, I will put enmity between your seed and between whose? The woman's seed. But the woman is not Eve. The woman is the heavenly or the spiritual or the extraterrestrial or extra-dimensional bride of the Almighty or the Creator. And the second phase of that is going to be brought out very soon, where we have that play out in the Christian Greek scriptures where it talks about the bride of Christ. And it's interesting, there's 10 virgins, 5 wise ones and 5 not so wise ones. And the wise ones buy extra oil for their lamps so their light stays on, while the foolish virgins don't buy the extra oil and their light goes out. So guess what? Those who are speaking the truth and speaking with light and in love, because after all, this is a marriage. There's love involved. Their light shines. How about that, huh?
Well, and I think for me, the thing with that is that, it's like we are all in bringing that sacred marriage into play in the world through how we participate. And that's certainly how I see crop circles as a food for that process happening, because, you and I can agree, but the danger, I think, for some people is to take it in a too childish way that this change is going to happen and we're just going to give it to them. They're just going to get it like we get everything in our materialist society, like you buy it.
I want it now.
Yeah, or an authority is going to come along and give it to you. And I think what I'm saying, and maybe what you're saying too, is that, this is about everyone that's listening and everyone in the world participating in their own struggle with, curiosity and heart, and just, it honors the process of every individual. And that's what I'm trying to do, is stoke the fire for every person to do their own thing.
Yeah, it's interesting. I've had a very unusual life, and I don't expect anybody to believe anything that I say. It's quite all right. I know what I saw. And you were talking earlier in the show about seeing people seeing extraterrestrials or these orbs floating around. I actually, both my son and myself, actually had our lives saved by a blue orb that instantly appeared out of nowhere and stopped a 250-pound deer from coming through the windshield of my car while I was traveling over 60 miles an hour. Interestingly enough, it was about a little bit bigger than a grapefruit when it appeared, and it blew up to about 30 inches, 3 foot in diameter, and all this while the deer is in the air. And when the deer impacted, it actually urinated down the driver's side, and its antlers bent the rain gutter on the passenger side. It went across the whole windshield. And when you look at the pictures that I took, there's a round depression about 36, between 30 and 36 inches round, right smack in the middle of the windshield, right where the orb appeared. And yeah, so I know what I saw, but this is typical of my life since I've been a child. So I don't need to be convinced about that. I know where this is actually going, and it's a fantastic future. But we have to get over this hump, which nobody can ever seem to get over. It's funny, whenever people talk about it, they call, it's the end of the world. No, it's the end of this paradigm. It's the end of this, I want it now, I'm better than you, you serve me, you're nothing but dirt under my feet, you goyim cattle, you're nothing worth more than slaughter.
Hmm. Yeah. And, unfortunately, our society really encourages that. And,
Yeah.
I've been around the world, and I'll tell you, there's few countries in the world that have got the worship of wealth down the way the United States does.
Oh,
I hate to say it,
absolutely.
but it's true. Most countries, they don't worship wealth the way the U.S. does, and it's a shame, but it's really true. And there's a lot to be said. When people say, well, there's obviously a lot in the Bible about this, but the fastest way to start looking down your nose at people is to have a little money. Unfortunately, we're all, none of us are perfect beings, and we all got our own weight to carry. But man, I sure see that a lot.
It is easier for a camel to fit through the eye of a needle than for a rich man to get into the kingdom of God.
Yeah, it just thinks it's too easy to think that you're so much better and smarter than everyone. There really is an illusion in America that's alive, that the rich people deserve it spiritually.
Well,
They're righteous, like that. Their reward for their righteousness is wealth, and that's very weird.
and I'll tell you something. When I had my own business some years ago, I had a landscape and construction business, and I was doing pretty darn well. And what I learned is that when you are doing well, when you do have extra money, and you are, I won't say I worshiped riches, that's for sure. Um, but I did enjoy my lifestyle that I had. I worked a lot, but I had 3 vehicles. I had the nice apartment with all the antique furniture and all that good stuff. But what I had was not real friends. I had leeches. To put it mildly. And what I find that, doing radio, obviously there's no money in truth. So I'm a poor man now, and I'm okay with that, because the friends I do have, they're really my friends. I know they're certainly not out to gain anything, because they're not going to do that with me. so there
yeah,
is,
and I have my own version of that too. I'm not saying I'm better than anybody. I just see that that's what happens.
Oh yeah, absolutely it does. And I've worked for people like that. They just got their nose in the air. You're nothing but a slave. Just do what you're told. You should be so glad to be able to hold my shirt tail for me when I walk. Believe me, I've worked for those type. And it's like, sometimes you get I hate to say it, but pleasure of watching them fall on their face. And when they do, right away, they turn to you and say, hey, buddy, old pal. So yeah, they do worship the riches. And we've talked about it on World Watchers, me and Peter, with Stu. And, for those who do worship their riches, they're going to get quite a surprise, because I have a feeling that things are about to change here in this country pretty quick.
Yeah, I hope so.
Yeah.
I hope so. And, it really is just about consciousness. And, unfortunately, having real easy success financially tends to not breed a whole lot of consciousness. It's like, the pretty girls have the least, impetus to have to really learn how to be nice.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Or something like that, not to put anybody down, but, as if success gives you no impetus to really look at yourself, but when you get your butt kicked a little bit by the world, you have to do some self-reflection and try and figure out your lessons and all that. And that's what I'm saying.
Oh yeah. Everything happens for a reason. Go ahead, Peter.
Well, I don't know about that, but
well, it does in some sense.
I would say everything happens for a reason. It depends on who's controlling the situation. Everything in our own lives should happen for a reason, and that's because we chose to put it there. Now, some people might be saying, "Oh, I just lost my job, and this happened and that happened." I didn't choose this. Nope, you didn't. And sometimes bad things happen to good people. We see that all the time.
Yeah, what I talk about with that is that the whole, like, the secret book and all that kind of stuff is, if you get your thoughts right, then you're going to have all this wealth and all that. Well, there's so much wrong with that, but it's the new age version of this same masculine inflation that I'm talking about. And what they're doing there is they're putting all the emphasis on the ego and on the conscious mind, and they're just throwing out all the unconscious, all the body, all the other consciousnesses in the universe. And the fact is that it's just a really unhealthy attitude, and the shadow loves that attitude and thrives on it. The places where everyone's trying to all just be all light and niceness all the time, well, there's no better operating place for someone who's really dark and shadowy, because nobody's ever going to call them on anything.
Gary, let me ask you a question. Have you ever had a near-death experience?
I have not, but I'm very interested in them.
I believe everyone should have one sometime. It would change your perspective. It really does. And here's the wonderful thing. I guess it's wonderful because nobody that I have ever talked to has had the same experience that I have had, nor the same experience as anybody else.
Well, let me ask you this quick, Peter. Does a near death, does that mean that you had to have died? Because how about being in a lake and pretty much saying, okay, well, you just accept that you're done and you go under and you think you're dead and someone gets you before you die? Does that count as near death? Because I certainly thought about my life at that moment.
Well, near death is actually a misnomer. I've heard that your life flashes before your eyes when you die. I didn't have that experience. Was I dead? I can't tell you if I was clinically dead because the records are missing. They disappeared with the doctor. But I can tell you that my consciousness, Elvis had left the building. My consciousness was no longer in my body, and I was literally connected to and being pulled into what you would call it, the great white light, or it's a huge giant energy orb. It's like we're connected. Now, the interesting thing is, I didn't see my whole life pass before my eyes. I saw plenty of reasons why I shouldn't die, and I was like, I couldn't get any message out that I was going down. And next thing I knew, I was out of my body watching them wheel me away. and when the protests stopped, and I was like, where am I going? My consciousness changed, and here my consciousness is enveloped in some sort of an energy. It's not an orb. It's more like a cloud, more like a vapor. And I'm being pulled directly into this great white energy orb. And how do you explain that scientifically? People would say, oh, well, yeah. Well, there's enough people have gone through an experience where they have either been clinically dead and measured clinically dead, or have experiences where they're out of their body watching the doctors frantically try to get their heart started, or something of that nature. And I'm sure that there are people who are out of their body when they are close to death. I was in a coma, and I got to see the birth of my youngest child.
Well, now, here's the thing I wonder about, Peter.
There was another one. Now, that was out of body. Could you say it was near death? Well, I don't know how near death I was, but I know I was in a coma because when I came to, my mother was standing there, and there was a lot of religious people around.
and here's the thing, Peter. I hear, people who've had near-death experiences describe being out of their bodies and seeing their bodies. Well, I had out-of-body experience, and, the same thing. You could see your body. The only difference is you're not going to any light or through any tunnels. So, I wonder, just how big of a difference is there?
Well, I've had both. I've had several out-of-body, and that's just you can have your own out-of-body experience. Don't think that I'm special or anybody who hasn't is special. You just have to learn to meditate properly. And then you can, when you get down into the low theta level or into delta, guess what? You can go interesting places, but that takes practice. You don't just go walking up to 400 pounds of weight and say, hey, watch me pick this up. You have to work up to that weight. And it's the same thing with meditation. It's possible, but you got to go there. Now, when I saw the birth of my child, my consciousness was looking down from the ceiling, and everything was in color. And it was interesting. My consciousness was at my body in the hospital, and a voice came to me and said, "Come with me." And I was like instantly transported, and I was looking down from the ceiling of the room in which my youngest child was being born in. And I watched the birth. I didn't know whether it was a boy or girl, but when I came to, the first words out of my mouth were, she had the baby, go make a phone call. And my mother had the most confused look on her face, and she said, "Okay." And I passed back out again. I went back under, don't know how long, but when I came to the second time, she was standing there. She said, "Congratulations, you have a son." So, we experience these things and we say, "Oh, wow, it's a miracle," or you met your guardian angel. No, we are multidimensional beings living in three-dimensional vessels. And we have a spiritual family. I'm sorry?
Yeah, partly three-dimensional, and maybe some other dimensions going on in us too, yeah?
Well, just by
That's the point of what you're saying, really.
Yeah, but by the mathematics, in order for our three dimensions to even exist, there needs to be at least 7 other dimensions. And according to the math, those 7 other dimensions get along just fine without us. But we don't exist without them. So there are 7 other spatial planes that support us here. And when you start looking at biblical numbers where 7 is a divine number and 10 is the earthly complete number, 7 and 3, 10, 7 dimensions, 3 dimensions, 10 dimensions. Oh, guess what? The math works. We have to have at least 10 dimensions plus the variable dimension of time in order to exist. But it doesn't have to end there. There can, in fact, be an infinite amount of dimensions.
And we were talking about
how far do you want to take out the math? It's just a matter of how big is the chalkboard and how much chalk do you have.
And going back to the crop circles, Peter, we were talking about, Gary and I were talking earlier, maybe some of this could be interdimensional. Maybe that's because, they're kind of like Bigfoot. They're there, but you never see them. I mean,
yeah. Remember, we only get to see things in visible light unless you've got special equipment to see into infrared or into the ultraviolet range. We only see things in visible light. So, I love the one video that's out there of a crop circle and 2 little orbs are running around the field and this crop circle is forming. It was done by somebody who was an expert in not Photoshop. It goes beyond that. He's a videotrometer.
I think I've seen that.
Yeah, and is it real or did he really do it?
Yeah, I think it's the Oliver's Castle is the one you're talking about, I think.
Now, okay, maybe he really did it, but that doesn't explain the truth of how they form, and they're legendary. If I recall correctly, wasn't the first one recorded back in like the 1400s?
Yeah, well, the first one is 1678 is the first thing that we have that's really, there's other references that are spotty, but the first one that really holds up academically is 1678.
I knew about the 1600 ones. I thought there was one earlier that went back to, but maybe it is the 1600s. If that was actually a printed article of it, if I recall correctly, it was exactly like some spirit creature reaping wheat, but and making a picture.
Yeah. So that's actually like the original. The guest on my second webinar episode coming up is Andy Thomas, and he's got a great article where he traced all the different versions of that pamphlet, and the original really is in the British Museum, and it really does exist as an archival document that we know is from that time.
Yeah, so how do you turn around and say, okay, well, this is just a hoax? Well, if it's a hoax, it's been going on for centuries. It's like, how do you turn around and say, well, the stuff that the Egyptians chiseled in stone aren't accurate or aren't true.
Well, and here's the thing too. I'm looking at a picture of one right now on the homepage on Late Night in the Midlands, and you know this particular one almost looks like the Hanukkah candle. I mean,
yeah, the menorah.
Yeah, I mean that's just fascinating.
Yep.
So there's a message there, and you know, Gary, I have to say, I like the way that you put that out there. That hey. You know, maybe there isn't any kind of secret code written in here. Maybe it's just a message to let us know we're not alone.
That could be it, because, you know, you see a lot of these circles, and you wonder if those don't represent, you know, planets. Like, hey, dummies, look, all these planets, you know.
Well, it can be both, too.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, but you know, you're not adding a general, oh, well, this one means that, and you're not giving an interpretation to any individual crop circles and saying, oh, well, you know, this means this and this means that. I mean, there's so many people that have turned around and come up with these bizarre things based on a crop circle, and I'm saying, wow, how did you figure this out?
Yeah, you can trip on that. I mean, and that's the danger for me, is that it becomes something that people are ego tripping on, and you know, maybe there's a lot of good stuff in that approach, and I've certainly seen things that I thought was valuable and interesting. But, you know, I'm coming from a different place, and I think that's what I've, you know, been talking about here with you guys all night.
And that's refreshing. It truly is refreshing, or I find it refreshing. And, you know, anything that brings you into the synchronicity, and I think that a lot of people can appreciate this, the Earth has its own vibration. It vibrates between theta and alpha. And so it vibrates from a conscious love to an unconscious love. For us to love, to really love, we need to take a minute, step back or step forward, maybe to the side, and say, I love you. It takes us out of the, I gotta go, I gotta run, see you later, paradigm. You see, it brings us into a personal connection with each other. Mm-hmm. And when you do that, it changes your brain's vibration to take it out of that fight or flight to, oh, I want to communicate. Mm-hmm. Now, just how intimately we communicate is another story. But,
and it's courage to do that.
Yeah. And so it all brings us to the vibration of what? Planet Earth. The alpha and the theta vibrations. When we go to sleep, we leave the beta vibration alone. Our brain doesn't operate in beta. If it does, we're not asleep, or something just scared the hell out of us out of our sleep, and we're wide awake now. But when you're sleeping, you go from alpha to theta to delta, from delta to theta to alpha all night long. It's a cycle. And so we vibrate right in sync with the Earth. Why don't we live in sync with the Earth? Why don't we live in sync with each other? And in order to do that, we got to get rid of the beta.
Yeah, that's what I hope we're coming back to.
Well, yeah, it certainly seems that way. I started posting a few weeks back on my Facebook page that the beta test failed. And that's where we are. I mean, when you look at things like Fukushima and the collapse of the monetary system and the world almost at each other's throat over something. There are so many social issues. Where do you want to start with that? The government doesn't work. It's all corrupt. Every government on the face of the planet is corrupt. New Zealand is said to be the least corrupt. And we got aliens. You know?
And there's so much to think about, but I think, you know, the way where I'm coming from, it just really emphasizes the importance of the individual. I think this is exactly what you're saying too. You know?
Yeah, and you know that there's actually a prophecy that totally pertains to this. It's in Malachi, the 4th chapter, and it may be tied into the Nibiru event. If there is a Nibiru event, something is going to cause the Earth to get upset. So exactly what it is, there's odds on that it's Nibiru or Planet X. But anyway, when you read Malachi, the 4th chapter, the 1st and 2nd verse, it says that the day is coming that is burning like the furnace, and the presumptuous and the wicked will become like chaff, like stubble, and they will be burned up, and neither root nor bough will be left to them. But because you had respect for my name, you will become like young. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm ahead of myself. The Son of Righteousness, and it's S-U-N of righteousness, with healing in its wings, will make you like young fattened calves, and you shall go forth pouring the ground. Verse 3 says, your enemies will become like dust under your feet. So now you have one event, but the wicked and the presumptuous are destroyed. But those who have respect for the Almighty, the Creator, those who are in that. Now you go to John, the fourth chapter, the 8th verse. I believe it's the 8th verse, 5th verse. I forget right now. But it says God is love. So you come down out of the beta vibration into the alpha vibration. Remember, it says in Revelation, I am the Alpha and the Omega. So you get into that alpha vibration and puts us in sync with the earth, no doubt in harmony with the rest of the universe and maybe the multiverse. And we survive whatever this cataclysm is because we don't have that fight or flight response. We stayed safe and we stayed connected to source.
Mm-hmm.
I really think that we're our own enemy, so we might be dust under our own feet. And
yeah, if you're your own worst enemy, you better start loving yourself.
But Gary,
that would be a good place to start.
I know that we've only got you for a few more minutes, and I want to give you an opportunity to get out any information that you'd like. And I want to thank you so much for joining me here tonight. And I look forward to reading your book and looking further into your work and having you back again in the future.
Thank you so much, Michael.
And Gary, I just want to say kudos. I love the way that you present this. It's going to harmonize with a lot of people. A lot of people are going to see the truth in what you're saying here because we need to be loved. And that's your main message. Hey, there's a message of love here. Time to get together, folks. Love each other. Kudos.
Thank you. Thank you very much. So Michael, is there a link on your page to my site at all? I know I posted one on your Facebook page.
Oh, yes, sir, there is. And, yeah, it's on the Facebook, and I always put the guest links on the website. And what I do now is either tonight or tomorrow, your links will end up on the links page that we have for past guests. So
great.
If you have
the direct page for me is Jung, J-U-N-G, and A-N-D, cropcircles.net. That's my main page, and then you can follow me on Facebook, facebook.com/Jung, J-U-N-G, and Crop Circles, Jung and Crop Circles. So that's it, and then you'll find information on the webinar there. The webinar starts next Sunday. It runs at 3 p.m. Eastern Time for an hour to 2 hours, probably 90 minutes, with questions and answers. It's a live interactive video symposium with 6 different guests, 6 different Sundays, starting next Sunday. Tonight's actually the last night. If people are really interested, tonight's the last night for the early bird, which is only $75 for 6 different presenters and myself for 6 sessions, which I think is a pretty good deal, including Suzanne Taylor, and we'll see clips from her films, Crop Circle's Quest for Truth and What on Earth, Inside the Crop Circle Mystery. We've got Andy Thomas, who's the biggest name in crop circles, who I like and who wrote a great endorsement for my book. I think he called it one of the most original and most valid approaches to crop circles he's read in a long time. We've got Andrew Harvey, who's a wonderful Rumi and goddess scholar coming up, and eminent and a huge teacher, and we're so lucky to have him. As well as a wonderful Feng Shui teacher coming in to talk about that with us. She's from Holland. And Sacred Geometer coming on, and someone to come on and talk to us about consciousness and physics and balls of light and all that stuff. So we've got a whole table set for people to come in and join us and have a good time with the mystery.
All right, awesome. And if you have any other links that you'd like me to post, just send them to me by email, and
Okay.
I'll be sure to put them in there. I thank you very much, and I like your approach to crop circles as well. You're not coming at it like, hey, I've got all the answers, and a lot of people do that, and you don't. You're still trying to find the answers, and you're doing some great research. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for having me. And I had a good time. Thank you. It was really wonderful tonight, and great to go into so much depth with both of you, and it was fun. Thank you.
Okay. Well, have a good one, Gary, and we'll talk to you again in the near future. And thank you again.
Thank you. Looking forward to it, Michael. Thank you.
All right.
That maybe there's something we're doing on a human level that's kind of working out the shadow in the background and the big background there. So I found that interesting, and I'm a student of philosophy, and I've thought that there's a good answer for why there's evil in the world there if we're kind of working out sort of God's shadow or something like that. That was an interesting idea. So I found it satisfying personally, and reading that book, something snapped into my head about crop circles, and I thought, wow, there's another step here, another dynamic step where there's something that we're taking forward. We're going into this new way of thinking about the world and ourselves. And, it's kind of like, I think we're at one of those moments, where, Galileo and Copernicus were, and a long time ago, we're finding out the world isn't flat. We're finding out that we're not the only conscious thing in the universe. And I think that's a really big step. And there's a lot of, trials and tribulations involved with that step, but here we are, and that's what got me writing. I wrote a master's thesis out of that idea and turned it into a book, and then the book has been self-published and doing well, and it's coming out in August again on North Atlantic Books, and away we go.
I'll be honest, I haven't read the book, but I do plan on it.
Okay.
Yeah, I absolutely do plan on it now, but I am very interested in the whole topic of the crop circles. I remember hearing about it when I was a kid, and the news would come on. And I remember one night when the 6 o'clock news came on, I was sitting at the table with my parents, and the lady said, oh, there's some guys who admitted to doing it with boards on their feet. And I'm thinking, there's no way, right? There's no way they could have done that, is there?
Yeah, we know those guys were a bunch of BS. They couldn't even make one good one. There was numerous trials with those two where they were given a chance to demonstrate their work, and it was always a joke. They could never do anything really well. Now, there are teams in the UK now that go and make really good hoax crop circles. But the story, that's Doug and Dave that you're referring to there, those two. And their story got published all around the world and publicized by a PR company from England. And that PR company only magically appeared out of nowhere to promote that one story, and then magically disappeared and never was heard from again. And the only address they ever gave was pretty close to, or in a complex where there were offices of British intelligence.
Yeah, see, now that tells me something. When they go out of their Gary, I welcome you to Late Night in the Midlands, and I also welcome you to give us some background.
Hi, Michael. Thank you. Is everybody doing okay? You're doing okay? I know the weather's pretty awful out there. Is everyone hanging in okay?
Yeah, we're hanging in there pretty good, but I've had a rough start here tonight. First, my startup music wouldn't go. It turned bright red and said no. Then I had the bio just went, I don't know, turned into a jigsaw puzzle on me. So other than that, doing fine. Yeah, it's warmed up here a little bit.
Good.
Yeah, thank God. But I don't think it warmed up everywhere. I think I'm one of the lucky ones.
Well, I know that everybody on the West Coast, we're not getting it so bad, but we're certainly thinking about everybody else, and we know everyone's having a hard time. So our thoughts and prayers are with you guys.
Well, yeah, absolutely. And, we had it pretty rough here, but there's places that had it a lot rougher than we did. We got the cold and the wind. Some of these places got the ice and the snow to go along with it, so it made it a lot rougher. But I find sometimes a lot of snow's not a bad thing because it kind of insulates and makes it warmer, I've heard. I don't know.
Yeah.
So, Gary, give us a little bit of background. What got you interested in this field? And tell us a little bit about your work. And let's learn about these crop circles.
Okay. Well, I think like a lot of people, I looked at the pictures in the 90s of crop circles and went online and looked through the online databases and looked at all of them kind of year after year and saw the pictures and enjoyed them that way. And then in 2000, I was going to school in Santa Barbara doing my master's degree in Jungian psychology, and I was reading a book by a guy named Edward Edinger called The Creation of Consciousness. And that book was about Carl Jung's book called Answer to Job, in which he puts the sort of Western God image on the couch, and he just sort of saw that there's an interactive relationship there between humans and the Hebrew God, and it's kind of a dynamic situation in which the human tends to be leading the moral way and kind of pulling Yahweh into more consciousness. And he thought, well, psychologically, maybe, we certainly see a dynamic relationship here. And that was really interesting and satisfying to me. And the idea that maybe there's something that we're doing on a human level that, and he didn't mean it metaphysically, but we can take it that way. Yeah, well, there's definitely people that have done really interesting research where they'll look at each individual one and kind of interpret it and find meaning in it. And I think that's, good. I think that's all fine and well, and there's a place for that. But I also think when we do that, that maybe there's also another piece, another way of approaching the mystery that we're not doing. And I think that, they're works of art. You can go into a museum and try and decode the Mona Lisa, but I think there's also something about, the aesthetic experience, the visual, beautiful experience. I mean, they're beautiful. I think we're supposed to have a feeling, emotional response and a wonder and get involved with them in a whole-bodied way, as well as trying to solve the puzzle, and that's all fine and good. But I think there's another piece there, too, and it calls us into, a more feeling-based appreciation of wonder and mystery. Our culture today is very high on itself, and I think we often think that we can, solve every puzzle and all this, and I think we've lost the mystery, and this phenomenon brings us back into wondering about mystery and participating with the mystery.
Right. And, one of the problems, I guess, with science, scientists today, is that if they can't measure it, then, it don't exist. And,
right.
They try to explain everything off, and they refuse to think outside the box. And, these crop circles are definitely something to be amazed by. And I have a picture slider on the homepage of LateNightInTheMidlands.com. And I've taken some pictures from your site and put them up just for tonight so people can get a look at some of these crop circles. And, I mean, they're absolutely amazing. Now, how far back has this been going on? I mean, how far back does this date to?
I think it's been going back thousands of years, and there's people that are speculating. There's actual academics in the UK and in England that are seriously considering the possibility that the stone circles that they have in England, Avebury and Stonehenge and, hundreds of them, that they think that there's at least a possibility that those stone circles were commemorating crop circles from thousands of years ago. And that's, people other than me that are seriously considering that as a possibility. Now, we know for a fact that there are archival documents that are, around, that there are copies of them in British museums.
A way to try to make something look like it's all a hoax, and for a fact that it's not. What are they trying to cover up?
Yeah, well, they're trying to cover up the truth, and the truth is out there. The truth is something is definitely going on. It's been going on for a long time, and there's science and history that can tell us objectively that there's a genuine crop circle mystery. There's also a hoaxing phenomenon going on, but there's a genuine crop circle mystery that's been going on for a long time. Now,
would you say that, out of all your research, would you think that there's, this is coming from, say, an ET source? Or, I've seen videos where people actually tried to claim that it was like a natural phenomenon of the Earth. But, I don't think Mother Nature or Mother Earth is, you know, all that good at drawing. These things look incredible.
Yeah, it's definitely something non-human, in my opinion. We know it's not people making it, so it is intelligent, it has intention, and, you know, there's a whole bunch, you know, in that question you just posed, Michael, there's a whole bunch of different things that I could talk about. So one of them I could talk about is, what do we mean when we say ET or extraterrestrial? I'm liking the word ultra-terrestrial lately. You know, what do we mean? You know, I'd ask the listeners to really think about, you know, okay, we say crop circles are done by ETs, and I certainly think they're done by some sort of other being, whatever you want to call it, some sort of other intelligence in the universe. I would ask your listeners, what do you picture there? Is it dimensional? Are they, you know, do they have, you know, just think about your own answer, because I think that for me, where we end up at the end of the day with this is that we're invited to think about our own questions more. And so that's where we go. Another way I could think about this question, you know, what's making it? Well, a lot of us do think that there's something to do with the Earth, because, you know, a lot of the key researchers, if you ask them, they're going to say, it sure feels like they're telling us something to do with the Earth.
Yeah, that's what I was getting at. That, you know, I look at it personally. I think it's a message that we're being told something. I don't know what, because you know, no one's being honest with us. But I've seen some that looks like they've got, you know, some of the designs are like planets, solar systems, and things like that. So I don't know. What do you think?
That prove that, you know, there were pamphlets circulated, like old newspapers from 1678 that's the earliest one we have. I think it's probably from much earlier, but we have a printed version from 1678 that shows the mowing devil woodcut, where they have this picture and it looks exactly like a crop circle with the devil doing it, and it tells you a story about a farmer, and the miller was asking too much, and he said, you know, I'd rather have the devil, I think it was a mower, sorry, not the miller. The mower was asking too much, and the farmer says, well, I'd rather have the devil mow it than you. And then that night, he sees a light in the field, and, you know, the next morning, all the crop has changed, and it just describes exactly what we see today as a crop circle, and that's from 1678. And at the end of it, he says he's afraid to go in his own field. You know, and then in 1686, we have an Oxford professor, Robert Plot, and his diagrams of the crop circles, and he believes there's some kind of environmental weather type phenomenon, you know, that's causing it. And in 1800, we have an English journal called Nature that describes exactly a crop circle again, and a listener Reader, I guess, had sent in a story saying, hey, I saw this in my field, what does everyone think? And he describes exactly a crop circle. So here we have not only a history, but I think we have like a Rorschach. You know, if we look at these things, we see the history of our own responses to crop circles, because, you know, that whole devil thing, for example, if you haven't really gotten a little afraid in really considering it, then maybe you haven't really thought about it, because, you know, it's the idea that there's this really other powerful kind of creature out there and they can do these. That's a pretty scary idea on a basic level. I don't think we should be afraid of them, but I think it's one of the natural responses to realizing, hey, there's some big other thing out there. And then we do the thing that we're doing today, which is, you know, Robert Plot in 1686 says, well, it's nature, and like you were describing, people think it's nature, a natural phenomenon. Well, I can tell you that doesn't cut it, and for most of the people that are really looking at the phenomenon, they know that doesn't cut it, because there's too much intention, there's too much on purpose, there's too much exact relationship geometrically between, say, for example, many of the formations and the geometry of surrounding stone circles. So there's nothing accidental about it, and we might say there's some element or